Good evening from New York. Happy Monday. I'm Chris Hayes. We have breaking news tonight that shows just how deep the rot in the Republican Party goes. But before getting to that, and we will in just a moment, take a step back just to sort of survey the last few weeks since the election, right? The most charitable thing someone could say about the bulk of the institutional Republican Party at the national level in the wake of the election that Donald Trump lost is that they're just kind of ignoring and pretending that Donald Trump is not having a total meltdown and attempting to torch American democracy. The nicest thing that can be said about the Mitch McConnells of the world, for instance, is that they are just letting him have his tantrum and hoping it all goes away. That's the best, the very best, most charitable thing you can say about them. But we have evidence tonight that that is not what is happening, that they are actually collaborating with Donald Trump in attempting to overthrow the results of a free and fair election. Because today, Georgia's Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, told the Washington Post he has come under increasing pressure from Republicans, including Senator Lindsey Graham, to throw away legal ballots. I'll quote, Graham asked whether Raffensperger had the power to toss all mail ballots in counties found to have higher rates of non-matching signatures, Raffensperger said. Raffensperger said he was stunned that Graham appeared to suggest that he find a way to toss legally cast ballots. Absent court intervention, Raffensperger doesn't have the power to do what Graham suggested as counties administer elections in Georgia. It sure looked like he was wanting to go down that road, he said. The Republican Secretary of State in Georgia says that South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, pressured him to dump legally cast ballots in a state where Donald Trump is losing by a relatively narrow margin. Now, Graham told a Wall Street Journal reporter tonight, quote, that's ridiculous. What I'm trying to find out was, how do you verify signatures from mail-in ballots in these states? I thought it was a good conversation. I'm surprised to hear him characterize it that way. Okay, but what on earth was the senator from South Carolina and the chair of the Judiciary Committee doing talking to a state election official in Georgia amidst a presidential recount? Mark Elias, the lawyer who has been fighting against Republican legal challenges across the country, responded to the story saying, quote, this is both outrageous and should be investigated by the Senate Ethics Committee. Now, as you'll remember, on election night, it did look like President Trump was winning in Georgia, though the New York Times Needle predicted otherwise late in the night. But as votes came in from Democratic counties around Atlanta, that lead slipped away. As it stands now, NBC News has called the state for President-elect Biden, who's leading by, and this really is somewhat surprising, 14,000 votes. And the state's two incumbent senators are both headed to a runoff election on January 5th. And the Secretary of State, Raffensperger, has announced a risk-limiting audit, which is a sort of canvassing of the votes that will trigger a statewide recount. Now, 14,000 votes may not seem like a lot, but it is a lot in terms of recounts. It is very unlikely the recount will change anything significantly. In fact, here is what Secretary of State Raffensperger said today before speaking to the Washington Post.
When people are out there making bold-faced lies, you just have to call it out with facts. So we're basically fact-bombing them with the truth.
The lieutenant governor of your state said today that there have been no examples that he's seen of systemic fraud or improprieties, and that it certainly appears that Joe Biden is the president-elect. Do you agree with him?
When he takes a deep breath to say, like, the obvious truth that we all know. The general complaint from Donald Trump and his allies seems to be, how dare you not fix us an election in our favor, fellow Republican? And rather than accept the very plain results of the presidential election, the Republican Party has resorted to eating their own and now just, like, flirting with outright criminal behavior, lawless yanking away at an election result. One thing that's become more and more clear in the 2 weeks since Election Day is this isn't like an indulging Trump thing. There's something deeply depraved here. The Republican Party is willing to do just about anything in order to maintain power. And we are just seeing how wildly dangerous it is when the president is creating political conditions for the entire Republican Party to join him in essentially seeking to overthrow or ignore the results in a democratic election. And they don't have any problem with that. With me now, the reporter who broke the story that Lindsey Graham pressured Georgia's Secretary of State to exclude illegal ballots, Washington Post national reporter Amy Gardner. Great scoop and great reporting, and all on the record interview with a key official. This is excellent journalism. What's the context of this conversation?
I think the context of the conversation is a real growing mountain of frustration on the part of Secretary Raffensperger about these baseless accusations and sort of pressure that he's been under since Election Day, really, to kind of get in line and talk about the potential that fraud actually is the only reason that Joe Biden could have won Georgia. And Brad Raffensperger didn't want to do that. And he's been trying to keep his head down, and he's been trying to support the local election officials who are actually the ones with the power to count the votes and canvass the votes and report the votes up and certify them county by county by county. And I think it took a turn for the personal for Brad Raffensperger in a couple of ways. First of all, he has been called, a rhino, Republican in name only. A congressman from Georgia has said that he's capitulated to the Democrats by not talking about fraud. And then his wife and he both received death threats over text messaging in the past several days. And I think he really hit a breaking point where he wasn't going to stay quiet anymore.
The Republican Congressman Doug Collins, who sort of unsuccessfully ran in that Senate runoff for Kelly Loeffler's seat, has sort of appointed himself or been appointed as the kind of Trump campaign, field general down in Georgia. He's been going after Raffensperger. All these people know each other. They're all Republicans in the state of Georgia. And he's, Raffensperger said that Collins is leading the president's effort in Georgia, called him a liar and a charlatan. Clearly, this is someone, Raffensperger is a pretty conservative guy, and he is definitely like a made man in the Georgia Republican Party. This is not a never Trumper. This is not a liberal. This is a guy who saw his view as to administer a free and fair election and is, I think, taken aback by what doing that has brought upon him.
I think that's right. And I also think that he doesn't think that the Republicans are being very smart politically here. The argument for all of this wrath coming down on his head and also just sort of the rhetoric that sort of impugns all the local election officials, arguably is to help Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, who have this runoff election on January 5th. Because everybody knows that Donald Trump is still talking about fraud, even though there's been no evidence to suggest that any one of these close states that decided the outcome had any widespread fraud on a measurable level. But so the fear is that Donald Trump is going to tweet something. He's going to tweet displeasure at Senator Loeffler or Senator Perdue. But what I think some of the other Republicans in the camp of Raffensperger who see this election being administered fairly and legally and ethically, I think their view is that that's not smart politically, that casting doubt on the election is a distraction that does the opposite of unify the Republican Party at a time when they need to get all of their voters out again just in a few short weeks. And one of the biggest accusations of alleged fraud going on in Georgia is that the manufacturer of the voting machines, a Colorado-based company called Dominion Voting Services, is like some leftist Venezuela-linked, conspiratorial, player and that stole votes from Donald Trump in Georgia, and that is actually causing Republicans, like on social media in Georgia, to say, I don't know if I want to use these machines on January 5th. Everyone's saying these machines are terrible, and it doesn't seem very smart for the Republicans either.
Amy Gardner, who's a reporter of the Washington Post, who broke that story in that interview with Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State of Georgia. Thank you so much for making time for us tonight.